Hi, I'm Leanpub from Leanpub, and in this episode of the Front Matter podcast, I'll be interviewing Ebenezer Don. Based in Lagos, Ebenezer is the founder of newdev.io, a learning platform focused on helping developers learn to code and collaborate with one another. He's also a popular teacher and speaker at conferences and meetups, and an active contributor to the open source community through a number of projects. You can follow him on Twitter at EbenezerDN, and check out his website at newdev.io, and subscribe to his popular YouTube channel just by looking for Ebenezer Don. Ebenezer is the author of the book, Simplified JavaScript for Very Important Programmers, the Fast Track to Mastering Essential JavaScript Concepts. In the book, Ebenezer provides readers with a practical and enjoyable way to learn JavaScript quickly and apply your newfound knowledge to real-world scenarios. In this interview, we're going to talk about his background and career, professional interests, his book, and at the end, we'll talk a little bit about his experience as a content creator. So thank you very much, Ebenezer, for being on the Leanpub Front Matter podcast.
Hi, Len. Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here.
Thanks. I always like to start these interviews by asking people for their origin story. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about where you grew up and how you found your way into a career in programming and creating such great content.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So I'm Nigerian. I grew up in Nigeria. And I guess from a very little age, I was interested in phones, mobile phones, and the Java applications. We call them Java applications. I'm not sure if they were really built with the Java programming language back then, but those keypad mobile phones. And I was interested in the applications there. And from that, I started using my keypad phone also. I got introduced to a content management system website, Wapka, back then, which I could use to build websites. And I had a keypad phone back then. So that's what I started using to build websites with my keypad phone. I started learning JavaScript also, so I could add some code snippets. It was more of content management, a content management system. But then I could add code snippets and customize my site so that it looks much different from every other person that's using that platform to build their own website. And that was I started learning JavaScript, learned HTML, CSS, and at the point I started learning Java with a PDF. So I didn't have a laptop all this while. I moved to an Android phone later on. And so somehow I was able to get a laptop finally. Before I got a laptop, I was borrowing a laptop to continue learning Java, to continue applying my knowledge. Then I had to work for a year. I could afford a laptop then. After I got my laptop, it was a mini laptop back then that I got. And then I started using that to keep learning, building websites and start earning. And I started working for other companies and, I had to upgrade, and that's how I got to where I am today. So it's been an interesting journey. I've had no complaints. I've enjoyed every part of the process.
That's a great story. Thank you very much for sharing that. It's so interesting. This podcast over the years has become a bit of a sort of like time capsule from people who sort of enter into the world of programming in different decades and circumstances and things like that. So, one of our guests, he was himself the first computer he ever used because it was his first job. And that was sort of in the sort of very early days of computing and things like that. And I've had people who a parent brought in the first kind of like Apple II or something like that, and they were learning from magazines. But I think you're the first person and there's some people, their first programming was on a calculator. But I think you're the first guest we've had who said, I learned programming and sort of website management stuff on a phone, which is just awesome. And so I gather from the story then that you were sort of self-taught. You didn't study computer science or anything like that.
Yeah, I was self-taught. There was no point in going to school to study computer science because I watched every other computer science graduate that came out of schools in my country and outside my country too, but majorly in my country, and they didn't know computer science. It was really crazy. I'm like, so if I go to school and then study computer science, I'm also going to come out not doing computer science. And I already became a programmer, and I attempted going to school. I went to school studying computer science, and they were not teaching me computer science. It was just a waste of time. I watched people who were in it was in levels, 100 levels, 200 levels, 300 levels, depending on the year. So their fourth years, their third years, and these people did not know how to code. They did not know computer science, and you're here to learn computer science, but you don't know anything about computer science. So that's really crazy. I couldn't just continue with them anymore. It was just a waste of time. They were overwhelming me, dragging me down, and I had to just leave and continue my work. So that's it. I've been self-taught. I learned through books. I use books a lot. I learned through PDFs. I learned through PDFs, except in particular because I didn't have that much access to internet when I was learning then. So, but if I have that PDF, I can always access it online. And if I had a physical copy of the offline rather, and if I had a physical copy of the book, I could always access it offline. So that's why I use books. I used books a lot. And I also use YouTube when I could. So I would download YouTube videos and so that I can be able to watch it over and over again. Yeah, so that was a time I also took advantage of edX courses, because the edX courses are free, and if we need certification, you pay. And Coursera, I use that to learn, also to continue my learning. I used Coursera back then, and the Microsoft courses, IBM, and the University of Washington courses there to learn machine learning when I was learning Python and machine learning. Yeah, so but it's been I've been learning from so many instructors on the internet, so many books, documentations, trial and error, putting everything I'm learning to practice, building applications in the process. Yeah, so that's how it's been for me.
And what was your first job in this area?
I worked for a company. I was doing web development basically, but not just web development. I also did graphic design. Part of doing web development, I was doing graphic design also, video content creation. Before I became a video content creator, I used to edit videos. Before I started recording videos myself, because I have a YouTube channel where I record videos, I used to edit videos also and create videos for people and for other establishments. And I did that, and I was also managing websites, web development, or web developer, different from someone who is part of a team. I was working alone for the company back then. And then before I joined a team, another company where I was part of a team, and that's how it's been. Also, I joined Andela, I joined Data Science Nigeria, and I've worked at JetBrains as a developer advocate. Yeah, and right now I'm working with New Dev.
Yeah, it's interesting.
New Dev is my learning platform, and a collaborative platform for developers also, where you can come learn to code and also collaborate with one another. You're working on something, you're building or you're learning, you can post daily and say, hey, this is what I'm building. And then you can reach out to other developers who are also doing the same thing as you are, or who share the same interests.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about New Dev in just a moment, but I just wanted to mention that when I was researching for this interview, I saw you had a relatively recent YouTube video called "How I Would Learn to Code If I Could Start Over." And I'm personally, the older I get, the bigger a fan I become of these. Like, oh man, if only I knew that when I was starting out. And I was kind of surprised until I learned more about you, that like the very first thing you say you should do is connect. Find the platforms where people are connecting with each other. The first thing you should do if you want to get into programming is that, where's the content being created? Where are people talking about it? Yeah. Get a profile out there, and hearing your story, sort of in person, as it were. It's sort of, so now I really get why that's so important, that the support that there is out there, the finding your way through all the amazing materials that there are out there, trying to keep up to date. I mean, that for the sort of starting out person in programming is like, really is the number one thing.
Yeah, that's very important, because I remember when I started back then, there was no one doing computer science or programming around me. And I don't think there were online communities, but if they were, I had no idea about them. So I was just on my own. When I got overwhelmed, there was no one to reach out to. I had to take that all in on my own. When I got confused, I had questions. There was a time I had the question of, does everyone writing code, every programmer remember everything? Do they memorize every line of code? Do they just write? I had that question for a long time, and there was no one to answer me. But I had to discover myself after some years, that, it's perfectly okay to look at documentation, it's perfectly okay to reference code and all of that. So I didn't have people that I could connect with. That's why I say right now that it's very easy to be part of a community. It's very easy to connect with other developers, leverage on that. It's going to be very difficult for you as a software developer if you stay away from all the software developers. If you stay away from other people, you get overwhelmed easily, you get discouraged. So it's very important that you connect with other people.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, in any kind of new job that you're completely new to, and in particular, if you don't have anyone to introduce you to it, like you don't have like a parent or an aunt or uncle or someone like that who could tell you. I had this experience myself in a couple of, but we all have, but in a couple of times in my life, and it's like, just knowing those things, like, yeah, like, does every developer do they remember every line of code they ever wrote? How are you going to find out the answer to that question? Only by doing it and by asking. One thing you talk about in that video as well is the importance of learning what you talk about as the fundamentals. And I was wondering if you could talk just a little briefly about what are the fundamentals that you need to learn if you're sort of getting into the life as a programmer, and particularly if you're doing it like independently the same way you did.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very important that you learn the fundamentals. Every day I get people who reach out to me and they have issues with JavaScript. They have issues with React, for example. React is a JavaScript framework. And when I dive in, I'll discover that they don't know the fundamentals of programming in the first place. They have issues with React, but they don't know the fundamentals of JavaScript in the first place. There's no way you can learn React and get it right. There's no way you can learn JavaScript and get it right if you don't have the fundamentals of programming at the back of your head. So you need to understand everything about storage, everything about memory management. You need to understand variables, objects, functions. These fundamentals, data structures, and all of this. You carry this information. This is programming itself, and this is what you carry across every other language you go to. So if you're working with JavaScript and you go to Python tomorrow, you're still going to meet data structures there. You're still going to meet arrays, objects like dictionaries. You're still going to meet functions. You're still going to meet basically everything about programming. What the difference is the syntax. And that's why I tell people you cannot skip like JavaScript, for example, and go to start learning React, because React is built upon JavaScript. So you're going to have lots of issues along the way if you skip the fundamentals. And those fundamentals are always going to be there to haunt you. So if you don't sit down and learn programming very well, don't just focus on memorizing language syntax, is what I tell people. Don't just focus on memorizing JavaScript as the programming language. When learning JavaScript, fine, you're learning JavaScript, but use JavaScript to learn programming. The skill of programming is the main thing there. Languages will come and go. There'll be different languages. Tomorrow there might be another language for the web. Next tomorrow, people might say Rust is the one, but if you go to Rust, it's still the same basics of programming. You're still going to get variables. You're still going to get data structures. You're still going to get arrays, objects. You're still going to see functions. You're still going to see many of these things, even if they might have different names. You're still going to start handling memory and all of that, but they might have different names, but it's still the same thing under the hood. So focus on learning the fundamentals, because when you learn the fundamentals, every other thing is going to be easy to connect.
The sort of old answer I would have given would have been, so you're saying you shouldn't just copy and paste from Stack Overflow. That's the old joke I would have made, but the new joke I would make, which is sort of semi-serious, and you've got a video about this recently as well, is in the age of ChatGPT, is it still so important for programmers to learn the fundamentals? What's your answer, Ebenezer?
Yeah, sure. So I got this question yesterday also about ChatGPT for people who are just learning to code. And I say it's very important that you learn how to code and not rely on tools. Don't rely on ChatGPT. Don't rely on Stack Overflow when you're learning. I mean, you can also use ChatGPT the way you use Stack Overflow normally. You have an issue, you can ask questions and you get answers. But don't let these tools replace your brain and your creativity. If not, there's not going to be any need for you. So feel free to leverage ChatGPT, Stack Overflow, and other AI tools or other human connecting tools. But don't let all those answers you see on the internet replace your brain and your creativity. So you want to learn how to code. It's very important that you learn how to code and not rely on ChatGPT. What if ChatGPT is not there tomorrow? And I mean, you can't expect ChatGPT or any AI tool to do everything for you. I've tried these tools myself, and most of the times they're not correct. So you have to also know, you need the knowledge, first of all, to be able to ask ChatGPT a question and know, maybe ChatGPT is making sense here, or maybe ChatGPT is just telling me lies confidently. So you need the knowledge in the first place to be able to use these tools and maybe vet the answers.
Yeah, it reminds me, I guess, of, the stories that would come up when Google Maps first came out, and people would just be like, tell me where to go. And they would end up sort of like lost in this sort of like wilderness, with no idea of how to get back from to where they came from, because they just weren't paying attention, or maybe chatting, listening to music, or even watching a movie. Who knows? Don't do this at home, by the way. But still having the fundamentals and still understanding it is of course very, very important. And so you've had I'm just looking at your LinkedIn profile here. You've had a number of jobs along the way, including for JetBrains, which we've had a number of Leanpub authors are from JetBrains are still there, and obviously it's like that institution is just great at training people to how to produce great content and stuff like that. And so are you independent now?
Yeah. So right now I'm with I'm working on building my learning community in New Dev. But I'm also open to contract roles, contract developer advocacy roles, or contract software engineering roles. But majorly I'm focused on the community. I'm focused on getting good content out there, because people struggle with getting good content these days. And And the new folks that come out these days are now like, hey, I understand your pain. I understand the pain of trying to search through the internet and not getting things that are easy to understand. They don't bother writing a book on like JavaScript or articles on like core JavaScript concepts because it's going to be lost. If I come here and write an article on variables in JavaScript, an easy way to understand variables or an easy way to understand functions, you're not going to find it on the internet because there are so many articles on functions from 10 years ago that are going to overshadow that one. So, but it's important for me that I also use the platform that I have to push these things out there. I've experienced trying to learn and being overwhelmed by convoluted explanations also. I'm like, wait, you're explaining this to me, but you're explaining like I already know it. I don't know it. I need to break it down. I'm not a genius. I just want to understand this. And I've experienced all that. And I want to put that knowledge out there. That's why I was bold enough to write the JavaScript book, even when there's so many JavaScript books, because I know that I am bringing that perspective of, hey, I'm going to break this down into the simplest of terms. I know what you're going through. I've been in your place and this is it.
Yeah, and for people who want to sort of get started on new dev, are there different entry points for if you're like a sort of like brand new to programming and you're learning, or there's something very specific you want to learn, like I want to learn CSS or I want to learn JavaScript or something like that? Are there different entry points that people should go to?
Yeah. So new dev currently we have content around HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But then we're including other languages as we go. Like we're going to include Python. We're going to include other frameworks. I have courses on React and tutorials on React. So I'm going to incorporate that into the new dev platform. And it's really for everyone. You come to new dev as a beginner, you're going to find other beginners. You come as an intermediate, you're going to find other intermediates or an advanced developer. And even if you don't find other intermediate or advanced developers, there are new developers right there that are looking for help. They're looking for people who are going to guide them. You see them every day. They're posting their progress and like, this is what I'm working on. This is what I was able to do. Oh, I had this bug and, I couldn't solve it. I need help. Oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Oh, there are people that there's someone last week that built a really beautiful website with just his mobile phone because he doesn't have a laptop. He can't afford a laptop, but he did not let that stop him. He built a website with just his mobile, and it looked really cool. You wrote JavaScript, HTML, CSS with his phone, and like people like this need support. They need to be told, "I love what you're doing. Keep going." It's good. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Just keep putting in the effort, keep pushing. So no matter the experience level you are, for new dev is for you. If you're not there to contribute, you can be there to help other developers. So that's what it is. And in terms of learning content, we are currently learning content around HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and we'll be working on much more in the future.
One thing I liked about going through New Dev, your website, was and sort of looking at the courses a little bit and things like that, is I love how you get this great balance of like being very serious and detailed and being kind of fun and welcoming at the same time. That's a really difficult balance to strike. And anyone who sort of like goes to your YouTube channel and sort of watches your videos will see what I mean right away. They're just great. And so just to talk a little bit about, to move on to the next part of the interview and talk a little bit about the book specifically, Simplified JavaScript for Very Important Programmers, the Fast Track to Mastering Essential JavaScript Concepts. So, and we talked a little bit about fundamentals already, but like, let's say what are two or three of the essential JavaScript concepts that people will learn from reading your book?
Yeah, so the essential JavaScript concepts you're going to learn from reading my book. And so in this book, I'm going to start from the basics first of all. I start with explaining how to use a web browser, history of JavaScript, but I keep it short and straight to the point. Use of JavaScript across multiple fields. Then I go on to data types, the JavaScript syntax, explain comments, conditional statements in JavaScript. People have difficulties understanding conditional statements when they start learning JavaScript. So that's explained very well. Functions is another very stronghold for people. They just can't seem to understand functions. So I broke that down into the simplest of terms. I explain functions with relatable examples. Explain variables. I explain arrays and other data structures, and then something like higher order functions too. So there are functions, there are higher order functions, and higher order functions, it's just really difficult. I posted on my WhatsApp status for my dev community that people can call me if they need JavaScript help. I give like 2 hours, like anyone can just call me and I'll pick the call and I'll help you with your JavaScript questions. And I had lots of questions around the HOFs too. I saw that it's something like that's really difficult for people to understand when they're just getting started. So I explained higher order functions, callbacks, JavaScript callback functions, objects, loops is one thing. I used relatable examples to explain loops, and I did a really good job in doing that. I would still love to hear from the readers, but yeah, so far the people who have read my book have told me how it has helped them understand JavaScript and understand loops more. I also explained browser events. So after working with normal JavaScript, you're going to get into let's say JavaScript for the web. So I focused on, first of all, the JavaScript basics, and then I went on to JavaScript for the web. And you want to understand things like browser events. So I explained browser events in my book. Browser storage also very important. I wish I had I didn't want to make it too complex. If not, I would have started talking about IndexedDB, other types of in browser storage. I explained cookies, local storage, but I didn't want to make it so complex and too voluminous. That was the whole point. I want to make it straight to the point so that it's easy to understand. So I didn't want to include IndexedDB into this particular book, but then I have an IndexedDB tutorial, so it's just going to be easy to follow my IndexedDB free tutorial on YouTube after reading the book. So that's also there for browser storage. Then asynchronous JavaScript is also a very fundamental part of JavaScript. If you want to work with JavaScript on the web or JavaScript server side, also you need understanding of asynchronous JavaScript. You need understanding of promises, and I talked about working with date and time and all of that. So I also included a project on building a to-do app. So after learning some things, you're going to use all the knowledge to build an application. So you see how this is applied real world.
Yeah, that's interesting. You've given me two great ways to sort of segue into the next part of the interview, where we talk about your work as an author and content creator and things like that. The first is talking about feedback, and the second thing was those very difficult decisions, like trade-offs that you have to make about an author, where like if you're writing something for someone who's a beginner, like where do you, it really is tricky to know how much detail you should go into, right? Like, because am I shortchanging them or leaving them lost if I don't go down this path? Or am I totally confusing them and like jumping 3 steps ahead? And that can be really difficult to do. But one of the ways to learn about that as an author is to get feedback from people. And you were mentioning that. So how do you get feedback from your readers?
Yeah, I do that a lot. I have Twitter spaces, I have calls, I ask a lot of questions on my WhatsApp status. WhatsApp status is one way I used. I have one of my channels I used to reach out to developers directly so they can just reply me via DM when I ask a question. So this is one way. And on my I interact with people a lot also. I go out for events, I interact with devs a lot, and then I get feedback and comments on my articles, and so many other ways I interact with developers. I make sure I carry everyone along when explaining these things, or when and I always fine tune my explanations. If I explain and you don't understand, I'll use that into the next explanation. Use that understanding that you don't understand the way I explained it, and explain it and work on the next explanation to include your learning process into it. So that's one thing I did.
Okay, we're just going to switch to audio only here, and Ebenezer is being very generous with his time, so we have time for a couple of more questions. One question I wanted to ask you, Ebenezer, was so your YouTube channel is quite popular and your videos get a lot of views, and I think a lot of people listening might be thinking of starting out as YouTube content creators, or might be frustrated with how well they're doing on the platform. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got so good at it and what some of your sort of tips might be for people who are looking to, be on YouTube.
Oh yeah, hopefully you can hear me better now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the number one tip is to start. If you're thinking about starting a YouTube channel, you're thinking about creating videos, just start creating videos. That might seem like a simple tip, but this is one thing that stops so many people from starting their YouTube channels, because they are waiting for the perfect time. They are waiting for the perfect equipment. They're waiting for the perfect audio, perfect video, perfect lighting. You can't get everything perfect in your first try, no matter how much effort you put into it. Your first try cannot be perfect. It's just not. I've not seen any YouTuber that had a perfect first video. So that's just not going to happen. So accept that and just publish a video. When I started creating YouTube videos, I did not have a camera back then. I was using my phone to record my videos, and I recorded with my phone, published. So you just start. I did not have lighting. I was using daylight. Just start with whatever equipment you have. You don't need the mic, you don't need the high-end device to start. When you get started, get that first video out of the way, and we call the second and the third, and then you can start thinking of getting all these equipment. And you can get all of them. You don't have to get all of them at once. It can be incremental, but just start. So that's in terms of equipment. In terms of knowledge, there are many people that feel like, do I know enough to share? The thing is, your perspective might be exactly what that one person somewhere in Europe, somewhere in their parents' garage needs. That one person somewhere in Africa, somewhere in America, somewhere in Asia needs. That particular perspective of yours, that one you have. That might just be what a beginner out there needs to understand the concept they've been battling with for months and for years. So just as long as you have knowledge, it's enough to share. As long as you have knowledge, you don't have to have enough knowledge. As long as you have knowledge, you can share it, and you learn along the way. Creating videos has helped me learn a lot about web development, about programming, about JavaScript, Python, and other languages that I've worked with. Because now I know that I'm teaching other people, so I have to spend the extra time learning. I work a lot more with documentations. I work a lot with also new frameworks like SolidJS. When SolidJS started back then, I was one of the first content creators to talk about it in 2021. That was in 2021. Yeah, 2021 July. And something like this. So it's going to help your knowledge building also. And you make a mistake, that's fine. If you discover that, hey, you said something wrong, that's okay. You're a human being. You can correct it. You can say, create another video and say, oh, this or that information I gave was wrong. This is the correct information. I've learned better. I know better. You can't expect you can't expect yourself to be perfect. So just start creating videos, and also share your videos. Also, don't create videos that keep it to yourself. You have to share it on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn. Share it with your colleagues and say, hey, check out my video. I'm proud of my work. I'm sure you love it.
That's really awesome advice. Just get out there, start doing it. And like in particular, I think one thing you're hinting at there is that if you're talking about something that you know about and there's any gaps in your knowledge, when you're talking about it on recording a video, you'll be like, oh, damn it. You'll realize right away what you're missing, and then learn what you need to fill in your own knowledge as well, which is just
right.
The last question I always like to ask on these interviews, if the guest is a Leanpub author, is if there was one thing we could fix for you that has you shaking your fist at Leanpub whenever you're using it, or one magical feature we could build for you, can you think of anything you would ask us to do? And please feel free to bring up any of the things that we talked about before we started recording if you want to.
Oh, yeah. So code blocks, in terms of code blocks for both the ebooks and the print-ready version, if we had more options. Programming books is very important. And also there's something I noticed about the numbering for the code blocks. I think that's a really cool feature, but I couldn't choose it because that was interfering with the matching for the print version. It was just out of the book, the numbering. If it can, I think if there's extra thought put into the code block, that'd be really cool, because I see lots and lots of programming books on Leanpub. So it's important that we have that feature. And then navigation too. There are so many things that I want to find, but I have to search for. I also discovered I think the drop down menu that makes navigation through your book when writing is easier, but I had no idea about that before. I just clicked on it and I saw that was there. Also, let me see what else. Oh yeah, in terms of finding the forum, so I think I talked about that earlier. In terms of finding the author forum, it should just be an easy button. It should be very easy to reach out to Leanpub and ask a question. If there's an easy chat button, in case you want to send an email, and there's just a button you can click and it opens up with this Leanpub's hello@Leanpub email address. That'd be really cool also. If there's an easy way to communicate with the folks at Leanpub, so I don't think that I'm just working with one company, one big company that's out of touch with the authors and out of touch with the people. So communication is I think you've done a really good job. When I had issues, I think I've talked about this before, which is the error messages. If it can be a lot straight to the point, a lot straightforward and specific, because I was really frustrated when I tried out Leanpub for the first time, and I almost left Leanpub. If I sent a message to a Leanpub, I found Leanpub's email address and sent a message, and then I got a response from sorry if I can't remember his name.
Peter, probably.
Peter, yeah. Peter, right? I had Peter, but I didn't want to call it wrongly.
Yeah, no.
So yeah, it's Peter. And he tried to explain and tried to help me debug it. Yeah, but if the error messages when trying to compile the book is much simpler and much specific and straight to the point, it'll be really easy to fix those problems. So yeah, he told me it's been worked on. So I believe that'll be fixed also. Yeah, so that's it. In terms of community also, I'd love to see a lot more activities around developers and around authors. I recognize that Leanpub is not just for developers, but for authors in general. I don't get that feeling though that there are other authors outside of programming that can come on Leanpub and write. You know, if Leanpub is for every author, I think that Leanpub should do more to include every author in every category, every specialization. But in terms of programming also, I'd love to see more interaction with the dev community. I don't know if Leanpub needs a developer advocate, but you know, I know that Len is the co-founder and you have lots of work to do. So in case that's too much work for you, and you could hire someone who do all of these other things, that would be really cool. Create more videos about you around using Leanpub, because Leanpub has so many functionalities, so many features, and it can get complex. But if there are easy videos on, hey, this is a Leanpub feature you can use. Hey, this is how to, for example, in formatting the book section, there are so many options there. Formatting the book for PDF, formatting this for print. There are so many options. It's really cool to have someone explain that to me. Because most of the authors that come to write on Leanpub have not done this before. And they've not published with other high or big publishing companies. So it'd be really cool to have, you know, explanatory videos on some of the features, some of the way to interact with Leanpub. And Leanpub also has an API that would be cool for programmers. So if there's someone who is explaining how to use these APIs, and why to use, not just how to use, why to use it. You know, if Leanpub feels like that's an interesting feature or that's something that we should use, I think there should be someone that knows why we should use it, why we should incorporate it into our applications and all of that, and then how to use it. You know, things like this would be really cool. I believe Leanpub has so many features that are really cool and would be used a lot if talked about well enough. Yeah, but overall, I Leanpub is a great website. I love how it was for me to, you know, once I got the bug fixed with generating my ebook. I love how easy it was for me to get the ebook from my Mac, from Markdown, and then get the print ready version. So yeah, totally worth it.
Thanks very much for all that really amazing feedback. You know, particularly with error messages, for example, sometimes when you click the button to generate ebooks from your manuscript, the book generation fails, and we don't provide very helpful descriptions of what line broke or anything like that, and that can be really frustrating. And you know, Leanpub is open to all authors, but if you want to know why there's so many programming authors on there, it's because when they see error message, they go into debug mode, and ordinary people are just like the bye. You know, and so we know that there's a lot of room we need there to improve. In particular, actually, what you made me think is like, I think I'm going to take a day and just record, like go through the author app and record like 2-minute videos for each feature, and put those up on YouTube or something like that. Cause that's definitely like something we could do, and we definitely should do in order to sort of particularly know what all the pain points are. Cause for example, when you mentioned, you know, not being able to find the authors forum, I'm like, you know, smacking my forehead, duh. But we know where it is because we built it and we use it all the time. But of course,
Yeah.
it actually is hard to find. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons we love doing these interviews with authors is because they tell us, and then we know what to do, what to work on. Well, Ebenezer, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to talk to me and to talk to our audience. And thank you very much for being a Leanpub author.
Thank you for having me, Len. It was a really good thing.
Thanks.